I think we have everyone from every team apart from team 3. Let me just ping them a message. Yeah, I think we have everyone here.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yeah, so today's little talk slash workshop is going to be on Netlify. But one thing I just want to raise prior to starting this actual talk slash workshop is if the teams do need to actually continue work on the application of the to get their MVP out of there, please do continue work on this. This is an optional talk. I am on Slack all day today, so if need be, if you need me to kind of run through a specific issue that you're having, or just kind of run through the presentation again with you on a one-to-one basis, then that's completely fine by me. So yeah, so let's kind of get started. So Netlify. So I'm not sure if many of you have kind of heard of Netlify before, but it is essentially a all-in-one platform for automating web projects. It allows you to kind of host your it's all-in-one platform for automating web projects. It essentially replaces well, it could potentially replace your current hosting infrastructure, your continuous integration deployment pipeline, and stick it all into one single workflow. I know in the past with projects that I've worked on, where I've had to kind of use Circle CI to handle all my continuous integration for my unit tests, all my integration tests, and maybe even end-to-end tests, and I couldn't all stick it into one workflow. So Netlify allows you to kind of stick it all into one single pipeline, which is perfect as a developer, as you can monitor anything from one screen. Another thing it allows you to do is integrate dynamic functionality like serverless functions, allow you to handle user authentication, form handling as well, which is quite nice, especially when it comes to web apps. So that essentially is what Netlify is in a nutshell. There's not a lot of complex moving parts to it. It is very simple. So let's kind of run through some of some basic features of Netlify. There are a lot more, and a lot of these features go into real in-depth, and it's quite amazing what they're kind of building on Netlify. But I'm just going to highlight some things that we're going to run through today, and it's kind of applicable to the applications that you guys are creating. So the first one is configurable bills. So what do I mean by configurable bills? So essentially what you can do is have one single build command and it does everything else. So normally what you'd have in a project is a npm run build or yarn build or something like that. And what that does is it runs like a webpack and kind of compiles all the assets down, minifies it, and there's all sorts of like magic that Webpack does essentially. But what you can do is you can kind of chain a bunch of commands into one command. So normally in projects now, I'm guessing not everyone has written scripts, or maybe and no one has created scripts for, so created tests for these MVPs. But what you can do is run like your unit tests essentially first. Then you can run your integration tests, and then you can run your end-to-end tests if need be, all in one easy script. Another cool thing that you can do with it is you can enable deploy notifications. So let's say you're working on a project at work, you push late night, just one of them ones where it's just a long night, you just want to get it out, so you just push it out, hoping that everything works, and then you get a notification on your phone, oh no, a build failed, a snapshot test failed, or something like that, and you can instantly jump back into the code, update that snapshot test, and then just continue pushing out the code again. The next thing that Netlify kind of does is atomic site deploys. Now, what do I mean by atomic site deploys? It kind of sounds just like a buzzword you just kind of throw in there just to kind of get customers, get users. But if you were to think of how Git handles file diffing, so when you push your code, when your initial commit or whatever, and you push your new component, for example, Git doesn't basically rewrite all the files, right? It does a diff. It compares, okay, what's changed, what's new, and let me just push the new things. So Atomic Netlify does this with the site deploys. So let's say you push a new component to the homepage, right? What Netlify will do is, because it does a lot of caching, it'll use the cache to build the majority of the new build. And then when it realizes that, okay, cool, you've got a new component, it'll literally just slot that in. That way your build time will get reduced drastically. Like one example of that would be like the Deen Developers site. And I can show you the build times afterwards. Building, like the build times for the Deen Developer site is quite ridiculous. It's, I think, the quickest build we had was like 40 odd seconds, and the slowest one was like 1:30 or 2 minutes. So it's very, very, very fast, which is amazing. Another thing that Netlify offers is site monitoring. I personally don't really use it that much. It is like a paid, you need to be on like a paying plan to have access to the site monitoring. But it's quite cool what it does in terms of like handling click interactions, user behaviors, and stuff like that. But you could get the same result by just using Google Analytics and maybe even Hotjar. If you guys have heard of that, essentially it just tracks user behavior on the site and kind of it produces a heat map, which is quite cool. The next feature it allows us to kind of hook into, and you'll be kind of using, is domains and HTTPS. So you can essentially connect custom domains to your Netlify site, and also buy domains through Netlify, which is quite nice. Just in case you want to keep everything in one like container, essentially. You can do things like that, which is quite good. Netlify also has a DNS panel as well. So one thing that we're going to do is once all the applications are in a state where we can kind of build them and show like somewhat of a working MVP, what we're going to do is just kind of update some DNS records just so that you guys can manage all the DNS records within Netlify, and you don't need to ask us to, hey, could we add this CNAME, this text record, things like that, which is quite cool. The next thing it allows you to do is hook into serverless functions. So these are quite nice. You can just kind of run serverless functions built with JS or Go or whatever during build. So you can hook into certain build tasks, or sorry, build hooks during your Netlify build, and you can just kind of run serverless functions in around there just to kind of fetch whatever information you want, which is quite nice. Netlify also has a CLI. Unfortunately, we're not going to be running through any of the CLI stuff today. However, it is quite good and quite nice. You can just kind of run everything in a couple of commands. If you do have any questions regarding that, then just give me a shout. We can kind of run through it quite easily. They also have an API, which you can use to authenticate, make requests, and then kind of create whatever you want. Because Netlify is like a hosting platform, but they also have like a CMS element to it as well. So if you kind of want to integrate those two, you can kind of make those two talk and create whatever product you want. Another nice thing that Netlify allows you to do is kind of create teams. And you can invite users to the teams, limit, you can limit how the roles and authentication, all that kind of stuff within Netlify. So yeah, that's kind of where it is. So the next part of this is we're going to start hacking up a project and kind of run through the flow of a standard create React application deploying to Netlify. So I already have a Netlify example. It's literally just a create React app. So if I just run this locally, hopefully it runs nice and smoothly. Oh dear. There we go. So cool, perfect. We have our MVP sorted right here. So now what we want to do is, now that we've got a basic MVP, we want to stick it online, throw it on the internet. So what you guys can do, and what I advise you to do, is just create a Netlify account and just start messing around with things. So
Sorry, we're just I'm still seeing the slides. Is there something else you're showing?
Do I need to actually, if I show the entire desktop?
Yeah, I think your sharing setting might be, yeah.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Sorry. So here's a React application, my lovely MVP that I created in 5 seconds. And now this is the Netlify dashboard. So once you create an account, log in, this is the dashboard that gets presented to you. So what we want to do is hit new site from Git. So what you can do now is you can connect to 3 main providers, so GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. I think pretty much everyone here is using GitHub, so we will stick with GitHub. Again, there's some authorization. And then you can just search for the application that you want to deploy. So in our case, we want to deploy this Netlify example. Oops. Empty or disabled? Oh no. I am silly. The repo is empty, so what I'm going to do is just push all these changes to master. Do a quick refresh. Connect it up to GitHub again, and we should be able to deploy that example. Okay, perfect. So the beauty of Netlify is it kind of can understand and read common configurations. So by common configurations, I mean so I'm not sure on all the tech stacks that are being used in this MVP. But I know some guys are using Create React App. I know some guys are using like Next and maybe some other front-end frameworks. But the good thing about Netlify is they do provide a list of common configurations. So if you want, I can send this link into the chat afterwards. But as you can see on the right hand side, we have like Gatsby apps, any like Hugo Jekyll apps, pretty standard JavaScript SPAs, and also Next.js. If your tech stack isn't listed here, don't worry. Getting up and running is really easy. So yeah, so let's get this thing deployed. So obviously I am the owner. The branch deploys master. The build command. So here is where we can kind of specify our build command essentially. Now this build command is literally listed in the package.json. So it just basically reads that one, which is good. And the publish directory. Now create React app kind of by default creates like a build directory, and you can just publish using that. I know Gatsby creates like a dist and some other ones, show different ones. So now we can just hit deploy site and we can preview all the deploy log. So here is where you probably be able to see if you're running any tests, you can just see all the tests here. And if it fails, obviously it'll error out and it'll notify you if you have any notifications set up. So while this is deploying, let's just run through some of the settings and some of the configurable stuff we can do with Netlify. So don't need to cover anything here, essentially. I guess one important part is the environment variables. If you guys have been setting environment variables using development, what you can do is basically set the variable key here and the value here, just so that Netlify knows what to look at and you don't get errors during build. An area that you guys will probably be spending a lot of time in today is like the domain management. So you can literally add a custom domain here. You could just kind of add, if you've already got a domain, you can literally just put in the custom domain here, verify it, and then in your DNS panel, we can kind of just configure it quite fine. Yeah, so here's the analytics area of it. You kind of need to pay $9 a month, which isn't great, but we can still get everything running. Okay, so site is live. Cool. So now if I just hit preview deploy, there we go. Cool. Super easy, super fast, all deployed, all ready to go. So yeah, it's like it really is super easy. Yeah.
Can I have a quick question?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm very new to this environment.
Mhm.
Never done it. So is it only, I'm assuming, just only for front end, any React application?
Yes.
For serverless. So if you have a DynamoDB backend and let's say AWS API, that needs to be deployed to AWS, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So unfortunately, Netlify doesn't kind of support deploying an entire backend through them. So your backend will need to be hosted on, like you said, AWS or Heroku or whatever service you decide to choose.
So how much is cost for each application roughly?
It's for Netlify.
Yep.
It's free.
Okay.
It will cost you a penny here. If you want to start creating teams and things like that, then yeah, there's a cost tied to that. But I imagine there'll only be like one of you, or you could create like a shared login and just kind of connect everything together.
Okay. Jazakallah.
Any other questions? The floor's yours.
So what technology they're using? I'm assuming some kind of node server.
So Netlify is based, I think in terms of like the infrastructure itself, it uses AWS.
Okay.
So it uses a bunch of like EC2 instances and this and that to kind of architect the madness behind it, essentially.
Yeah. It's not running Linux or something, or OS. What kind of?
In terms of building, so in terms when it comes to like actually building the application, it does use a Linux container to kind of run all your applications. So you can configure that just in case you need to build in a different container environment.
Okay. And I can see you can write function as well. Functions.
Yeah. Yes,
so
it can
like a Lambda
quite,
functions or
yeah,
Azure.
that's essentially where it is. And if you want to do that, I think all you really need to do is create like a functions directory in the root of your
application.
Yeah, and then you can just run whatever you want.
So I'm assuming it's like a JavaScript file. You just write a function.
Yeah, so you can run it in the two languages I think they currently support is Go and Node.js or JavaScript. And you can do whatever you need.
For identity, what is the main identity? Is it some OAuth or something?
Yeah, so for identity is essentially, let's say you want to, over here, it's like you can manage signups, login. So let's say your application.
JSON Web Token, okay.
Yeah, so let's say your application is like password protected.
So if I enable identity, then I have to pay for it, I'm assuming. JSON Web Token.
It is free. So basically, the first 1,000 users is free. But then once you get more users and you want like OAuth integration and things like that, then you will most likely need to pay for it.
You also have notification. Is this some kind of queuing messaging service under identity? If you go identity, yep, no, it's okay. Notification there.
So yeah, so basically, let's say you have it's similar to I guess you could think of it as like kind of like a mailing list, essentially. So anyone who's subscribed to these notifications, you can kind of send them emails. So one example would be like forgotten password email, login, thank you for creating an account email, things like that.
And last question, brother, there's a forms tab. What's that?
So Netlify allows you to gather like form information. So let's say you have like a contact form. What you can do is stick that on your site, connect it with the correct attributes that Netlify look for, and then any submissions to that contact form will get pushed to your dashboard here. So I guess I personally don't see like a real use for it, mainly because for any forms that I use on the site, it's mainly for like email marketing. And in that case, I just use like MailChimp and just use the API and just push the email to the mailing list. But I guess if you want to manage like all your forms, all your mailing information within Netlify, you have this option here. So yeah, if you do want to kind of encapsulate it all, it's really easy.
Yeah. And access control, is it you can give a read permission and stuff like that?
Yeah. So it's to do with like OAuth, visitor access, and things like that. So you can limit what a person can see based on their access, which you can define in that identity and things like that.
Yeah. An image, if I have quite a few image like assets, is it obviously it will deploy part of GitHub?
Yeah. So I presume, I'm not sure. Yeah. So I presume you're familiar with like GitLFS, so large file storage in Git. Usually, like I'm not expecting a lot of applications to have like megs and megs of like just image assets or assets in general. But Netlify does support it. But one cool thing is because all your applications are, well, I'm hoping the majority of them are going to be like static assets. What can happen is if you're going to deploy settings, we can do like a bunch of post processing. So you can do like snippet injection, asset optimizations, and maybe even a lot of Next.js applications can hook into this, but pre-rendering of certain routes and certain links, which is quite nice. So yeah.
Okay, so I think pretty much. And I saw a split testing. What was that? Split?
Yeah. So if you were to think of just like A/B tests, essentially, what you can do is do like an A/B test based on a branch. So you can deploy like your test, your test branch called, I don't know, feature one, I don't alternate homepage or something like that, right? And you can deploy that and show it to a certain percentage of users, and then obviously you can get analytics based on that test, like click conversions, this and that. I guess what you probably need to do is hook into your tracking tools, so Google Analytics, maybe even Netlify Analytics, just to see whether or not this change has actually been beneficial or not. So essentially that's kind of what it is. It's just A/B tests, but based on branches.
And to get this Nullify account, obviously it's free, but I need to have a domain associated.
Yeah, so we already have, we already bought all the domains. So what we're going to do is to give you access and to give you the power to update all the DNS records, we are simply just going to change the name servers in GoDaddy to point at Netlify. And then you guys can add whatever mail exchange records you want and things like that. So yeah.
So if I let's say I want to create two site. One is dev environment, so I can test it. I don't want to go live, and I can create. So I have to. I'm assuming, can I do under one domain, live and some kind of flag?
You could set up like a subdomain here.
Okay, subdomain, yeah.
And then do it like that. Or if you want, you could just set up two separate sites in general. One can just build on develop, and one can build on master.
So if I do subdomain, then I need to deploy. I have to configure it to. So let's say my dev environment. I built a dev React application. I want to deploy to dev domain. I need to configure that, right? on the
Yeah.
deployment.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't be able to do that till the domains themselves have been switched
Yeah.
over to Point and Netlify.
Correct.
So if your application, and this applies to everyone, if the application is in a state where you can actually build it all and kind of see something, it doesn't need to look great.
Yeah.
Then please let us know, and then we can kind of start this process of switching everyone over to Netlify, things like that.
I think I've got enough answers.
Cool. That's fine. Yeah, if you've got any, and again, this applies to everyone, if you've got any more questions in terms of Netlify, and if you run into any weird build issues, please let me know. Again, the docs are quite good as well. So a quick Google should kind of return your answer, hopefully. So yeah, that's, I guess if does anybody else have any more questions regarding Netlify?
No.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, so if you guys need any further questions, just let me know, and let the guys know. We're all here to help. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wassalam.
Walaikum salam.